Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 3 Point Weekly. Today, we are going to be continuing our top 10 ranking series with the small forward position. Again, quick reminder, all position rankings are being based off of ESPN positions. So if you disagree with someone's positions, we're not determining it. We're just going off of ESPN. Some of them are wonky. Last week, we covered shooting guards, where we had some interesting rankings with everyone having Paul George at number 1, but Donovan Mitchell being as low as number 6. So be sure to check that out if that interests you. But we're going to continue with small forwards today. We're going to let Gabe start us off again today.
Ooh.
Who do you got at number 10?
I feel like I'm always in this pressure spot because I don't get to react to what you guys said. I'm throwing myself into the hot water. Yeah, man. Usually I feel like we start these lists off with some high value role players, maybe some quality starters, but I got an all-star at number 10, and not just an all-star, an all-star starter. Andrew Wiggins is my number 10 spot. Fit in well with Golden State the past year, even 2 years, you could argue. Obviously got his shine this year in a big way. Played some good defense. Played well enough in the finals and just was really impactful for this team, really turning his career around. So I decided to give him that shout. There was a couple guys that were close here. Got my honorable mentions like OG Anunoby, Bojan Bogdanovic, even Franz Wagner to an extent. But Andrew Wiggins, I thought, just barely edged him out. So he took my number 10 spot.
He was my 10 too. Yeah. It's crazy how his value as a role player is higher than it ever was as being number 1 or number 2 option, wherever he was in Minnesota. But he's found his way. He was the second best player in the finals. He did a hell of a job guarding Jayson Tatum in that series and did a good job guarding Luka too. He didn't stop Luka, but he made it very difficult for Luka to get to his spots, every single possession, which we don't see a lot of people be able to do. So Wiggins found his way with the Golden State Warriors and, was the second best player on the team that won the championship. And he was an all-star starter. So an all-star number 10. It's crazy because last year Wiggins was probably nowhere on anybody's top 10 list, but now he's easily top 10. And, if we were keeping guys off because of injury or if certain players had their correct position, he would probably be even higher.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you guys just said there. I also have Wiggins at number 10. Like you guys said, really just improved his ability to do everything else other than just score over the last couple of years in Golden State. Speaking of defense too, his rebounding just became very good to a lead out of nowhere in the finals last year. It's really impressive the improvements he's made in every other part of his game over the last couple of years. So yeah, definitely a top 10 small forward at this point in time. No doubt about it.
I think he had a game he had 15 rebounds and probably 5 or 6 of them were all offensive. Yeah, it did he turned into Dennis Rodman out of nowhere. Him and Kevon Looney was just dominating the boards in the playoffs.
Yeah, the way he switched his entire game is so interesting. Just because, 2-3 years ago, it's Andrew Wiggins was going to take shots and not very efficient ones at that, deep mid-range stuff like that, just not really the optimal shots statistically, and nothing else really, not much on the playmaking side or the rebounding side or the defense side. And it's we knew he had the tools, but he just wasn't really executing. And the fact that now he's been in this system, I say what you want about Draymond, but I feel like playing with him probably is one of the main factors that got him to really buy in and do some of that dirty work and just the stuff around that just needs done to be a winning basketball team. And to be able to fit in there is very valuable.
Agreed.
I'm going to kick us off with number 9 here. I'm very curious to see who Gabe has at number 9 here because my number 9 is one of his honorable mentions. I have OG Anunoby here at number 9. I could have flipped back and forth between him and Wiggins. It was pretty close for me. They're both great defenders. I've seen it a bit more from Anunoby, but they're both great defenders at this point in time. But I'll probably still take Anunoby slightly over him. But Anunoby has just continued to prove a little bit more year in, year out on the offensive end. His efficiency did hurt last year because of it, but he had to play a very significant role, especially throughout those first 20 games of the season where at times, before Freddie really got going, he was at times the lead guy on the offense, which isn't ideal, but he wasn't terrible at it either, all considering. He's just that perfect 3-and-D wing, and he can create a little bit more offense for you now at this point in time. as I said, the difference between him and Wiggins for me was pretty negligible, but there's no doubt everyone always wants OG Anunoby in those off-season Twitter trade packages that you see, and there's a reason for that. He's that great 3-and-D wing, and will truly just get to be a 3-and-D wing this year in Toronto, which is great because Siakam will be back around healthy for the entire year, and Freddie should be ready to go as well.
I'm so interested now because OG didn't make my list either. He was the first guy off. My 9 was Mikal Bridges. We know what he brings defensively. There's nice offensively where he can be, very good. We've seen it. His 3-point shooting took a little bit of a hit last year, but I think you talk about OG being a typical 3-and-D guy. I think Mikal's in that realm, even though he's probably not as good as a 3-point shooter, but he's still, when he's at his best, he's around league average, which is really all you can ask for because of what he brings defensively is second to none. I mean, obviously he was a top 3 candidate and defensive player of the year. I think Gabe had him winning defensive player of the year.
I believe so.
Yeah. So, we know he's that on defense. And, I would definitely like to see a little more from him offensively, more consistently some nights. But we know what he brings to the Suns. He's like the perfect piece to have alongside CP and D-Book. And yet his impact is, you see it every night when he's on the floor.
Yeah, I also have Mikal at number 9, which makes me think that Devin forgot somebody because I cannot imagine you not having any of the top 8 not on here as far as my top 8 goes. So unless you did not have Mikal on your list, then
I did not have Mikal on my list. He was the odd man out.
Okay,
I had to leave out one of him, OG, and Wiggins, and Mikal was my odd man out.
Yeah, I feel like Mikal is probably he could be argued for the best defender on this list, at the very least top 3. So it's like top 3 defender at your position. Obviously, yeah, his offense is really similar to Wiggins, where some nights he can go off and have a pretty good night, but he just isn't asked to do that all the time because they have Booker, because they have CP3. Even if Ayton's getting a lot of touches that night or whoever it may be, I think he's shown ability where he can score in the 20s if asked, but it's just not exactly his role. And so it's just kind of that same thing of he just fits what the team is trying to do, does what he's asked, and does that so well that it kind of gives me bonus points, even if his counting stats aren't all the way there.
Yeah. It's tough. It was splitting hairs between him, Wiggins, OG. It didn't feel right leaving OG off because OG is so good. Yeah. And I even think I don't want to say the Raptors are holding him back, but I think his game has another level to it. It's just the Raptors have so many weapons offensively. I think you guys are the only team that has 5 guys that average 15 plus points, which is, kind of a crazy stat. So, the best could be outside of the Raptors, but the Raptors kind of need OG too. So it's just, it's tough to leave him off the list for sure.
Yeah, they're all so close. Like I said, I even had Bojan pretty close to that tier. He'd definitely be 12 for me out of anything. But that's when we talk about, I think we talked about kind of tiers of the list last week. Those 3 to 4 guys are the really high value starter tier.
Yeah.
And then kind of as we go past this, I think is when we start getting into stars.
Yeah, 100%. Those 3 were definitely really tough to choose between.
Go ahead, kick us off with number 8, Gabe.
All right. Well, I mean, we were just talking about him before we started the episode. Kind of forgot this guy because of positions, but I had to slide him in here real quick. Anthony Edwards. And so obviously there's a lot of hype around him. Some of that probably due to his acting performance, but a lot of it due to his performance in the playoffs, which was very promising. And everybody knows I'm the guy here that values the playoffs a lot. But just the other 7 guys above him were just statistically the gap between him and the other guys around him in the regular season was pretty wide still very young player. So where this is where he's at now, but I know we've had conversations on the other list of who has the most room to grow in the next year. If Anthony Edwards was at number 4 on this list a year from now, I would not be surprised at all. Obviously, his potential is through the roof. Kind of when he got drafted, there was all those questions of, is he even the best player here? Does he even like basketball? And I think he's proven very quickly that he definitely was the right pick in that position. Kind of along with Cat and their supporting cast has led Minnesota back into some winning ways, which is really impressive, I think. When you go into a team in a situation that just hasn't done much of winning in the past almost like decade and a half, basically, and kind of being one of the catalysts of turning that around, that's going to get you some bonus points, even if your stats aren't all the way there. But just, I'm sure you guys have a ton to say about him because I know you guys are bought in on the hype too. So I'll let you guys go.
Yeah, dark horse MVP candidate Anthony Edwards, man. He's my number 8 too. Everything you just said, couldn't put him too high because we're not projecting. But I think whether he's on a 2 guards list next year or if he's still on small forwards, he's going to be a lot higher. I think he's going to have an amazing season. But what he showed last year is that he showed a lot of promise as being the best player on the Timberwolves, like in the future. I think that's going to be his role. We talked about him a lot already, like within the last couple of months. Just we all know how good he is and how great he's going to be, but couldn't put him ahead of some of the guys ahead of him because everybody else on this list is all-stars and a lot of all-NBA players ahead of him as well. But he's going to be in that conversation very, very soon.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely be looking at him in a much different spot on this list in a couple of years. I did have him 1 slot higher. I have Chris Middleton here at number 8. My all-star pick for last year.
Dev the prophet. You're rating your own guy that low.
As much as I do like Middleton, he wasn't as good as I like to think he was last year. His impact is great, and he's still a very good player, but he did struggle at times last year from a scoring and efficiency standpoint to his standards. I mean, he's still putting up 20 a night on relatively good efficiency, but I couldn't quite put him above Anthony Edwards. When I influence what I saw from Edwards in the playoffs, it was just a little bit of a nudge for me to put him over him. But Middleton still had a very good year last year. He's still a great two-way wing. He's a great second option in Milwaukee. It was unfortunate that he ended up not being able to finish out the playoffs. I think we could have saw a lot more entertaining basketball, regardless of what way the Eastern Conference playoffs went, if Middleton could have stayed on the court. But he's my guy that I got to ride with as my all-star pick for last year. Would have liked to put him higher, but number 8 is where he falls.
Yeah, you got to take that to the grave. Like, yeah, you had Chris Middleton as an all-star when I don't think many other people did, especially on this podcast. But, yeah, I mean, I do understand. I mean, kind of splitting hairs. Chris Middleton's my number 7, and I was flipping between him and the next guy on my list. Like, I didn't know who to put higher, but I'm going to factor in, like, you mentioned the playoffs. Chris Middleton obviously did not play the entirety of the playoffs pretty much. Put him at 7, but he's the most perfect number 2 guy to have next to Giannis. And even though his efficiency may have not been, what it usually is, where he's usually close to 50, 40, 90, still very good year. And we know he steps his game up in the playoffs, which we didn't get to see. So that does knock it down a little bit, but still we know what Chris Middleton brings to the table.
Wow. I do not have Chris Middleton at 7. So I guess I'm a bit higher on Chris Middleton than you guys.
I like it.
So yeah, we'll cover that.
We have the same list, Gabe. I was getting scared for a second.
I know. So I guess we'll cover that when we have that. Number 7, I was really splitting hairs with like 5 to 7 here. And my number 7, this is really painful because I have like 4 of his jerseys.
DeMar?
I have DeMar DeRozan at 7.
That's 7. Okay.
And he did just come off the best season of his career. But then again, it's like they got to the playoffs, and I know the Bulls were kind of falling apart around him, but it's like another disappointing playoff performance for like just him and the whole team. Like, I don't know. He's just such like a known commodity, and it's like, yes, he was putting up some insane stats in the regular season with this team. But at the end of the day, it's like everybody above him has shown in those big time moments and like playoff situations, like they'll come through and win games for the team and just like take it to another level. And somehow DeMar just seems like he never takes it to that other level. And while his regular season was like really impressive, it's just like what he's been doing for so long. And when you're that much of a veteran in the league and you're kind of a known commodity, yes, it was really cool to see. But at the end of the day, last season ended, and I feel like nobody's perception of him really shifted. Not to mention, still a little bit limited from like 3, a little bit limited on the defensive end, which, I mean, it's like it's better than it used to be. But like I said, when I'm splitting hairs here, I think his weaknesses are still a bit apparent, and it just like really wasn't substantial enough in terms of taking his team somewhere or really like elevating what's going on around him to put him higher than 7.
I have DeMar a little bit higher than 7. I'll say that. That's tough. That might be the first hot take of the video.
Yeah, he's definitely higher on my list as well, but I definitely can see where you're coming from. I'll touch on that more when he comes up on my list, but I definitely see where you're coming from. He's very elite at what he does well, but there's definitely some glaring weaknesses in his game compared to some of the other guys at this point in time in the list, for sure.
7 though?
Yeah, as previously mentioned, my number 7 was Anthony Edwards. I don't really have too much else to add there. He's going to be a lot higher on this list in a couple of years' time. Dark Horse MVP is definitely a legit conversation that can be had about Anthony Edwards moving forward. I think he's going to be the number 1 guy for the Timberwolves moving forward, and I hope that team as a whole can be good enough to allow him to have that opportunity. Moving into number 6 is where I had DeMar DeRozan. As you mentioned, Gabe, he is very, very good at what he does well. And what he does well is some of the things I like most about watching NBA basketball. He draws fouls in a very intelligent way. His footwork in the mid-range is outrageous. His footwork at getting to the rim is very good. He plays such a smooth style of basketball in that mid-range area. I've just always enjoyed watching him, regardless of whether he's on the Raptors or not, due to my Raptors fandom. But as you mentioned, Gabe, his weaknesses are definitely significant when you look at the type of guys on this level. Not having a 3-point shot does hurt at times, especially as he does get older and you get into the playoffs and he's still athletic, but not quite as athletic. When you don't have that 3-point shot, it does make things a little bit more difficult. And his defense, as you mentioned, there was always hope he'd be a good defender, and it's obviously just never happened and likely never will at this point. And that really hurts because you can get away with a guy not being a great defender, but there's some nights where DeMar has improved defensively, but there's some nights where he still just is not giving anywhere near enough effort. And that hurts. And now last year, that obviously has to be factored in with the fact that he had to carry that Bulls offense at times. And so his defensive effort was going to be lacking. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the things I have to start picking at and really deciphering between when we're looking at the elite talent at the top of this list. And unfortunately, that means DeRozan goes to 6. But as you mentioned, Gabe, brilliant season for him last year. Hopefully we can have another great year from him in Chicago. But brilliant year last year.
Yeah, it was like the opposite of Ant for me. Like how Ant had a really good playoff performance, but the regular season just wasn't kind of there enough. DeMar had a really good regular season, but it's just the playoffs is the same old story, just happening again in a different place.
It's really DeMar DeRozan in the playoffs. I thought he was going to knock that stigma off, but because he had that one for 40-point game, and then the rest of the series he was terrible. So. Man, sucks. I still have DeMar a little higher though, but that's a great argument that you just provided, Dev and Gabe. Y'all mentioned some really good points for sure. My number 6, I have Brandon Ingram, and I did want to put him higher. I really did. I'm a big fan of BI, but we didn't see it for the full season. He did miss some time with injury, but when he came back, there was obviously a big shift in the Pelicans. Wasn't his best year statistically, but I think it was his best year as an NBA player because we saw the improvements as a playmaker it was on full display. His defense, it's not there every single night, but when he's locked in, he's a pretty solid defender, and I just want to see that for an entire season. And I think with Zion coming back, there will be a little less on his shoulders offensively, a full year of CJ. So I think the best is yet to come for BI, but based off of last season, I'm going to put him at number 6. And I'm hopeful that he can get back to all-star form because we know he's that type of talent. It's just a matter of, there's so many good wings in the Western Conference, especially with Kawhi coming back, Paul George being healthy a full season. But B.I. is that guy, man. He really is, and he's my number 6.
Yeah, I've got him at number 6 as well. I think his season was, like you said, kind of his 3-point percentages, a couple other things were a little down, but just the way he rounded out his game over the last season, really coming in and being a number 1 option for that team. And then playing alongside with CJ, fitting with him, and as they went into playoff time, not that his regular season was really bad by any stretch. I mean, he still played well, but the way he performed in the playoffs, like a very efficient 27 against the 1 seed, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, kind of doing it all for the team. Like we said, like in the regular season, his 3-point percentage was kind of struggling. He shot 40% from 3 in the playoffs. Obviously, not as large of a sample size, but you're also playing against the team who had the best record in the league. So it's like, who are you doing that against? Basically, the biggest moments, the toughest moments, Brandon Ingram really came through, elevated his game, and a lot of people thought that the Pelicans were going to win that series for a minute. Like, obviously, they ended up losing, but they had a lot more of a chance than I think people thought they would when they first went into it. Yeah. So I just really high on him. I think he could even grow a little bit more going into next season. Obviously, we think Ant could be the highest climber, but like Brandon Ingram could be second depending on what some of the other guys on this list do next season.
I think with BI, like at worst, he's going to be around the same spot because he's just that stable. He's just that consistent. But I mean, he's like what? Is he still like 24? Did he just turn 25? Like he's still
25 as of 9 days ago. Yeah,
still so young, man. And like, I'm so intrigued to see like how Willie Green decides to run things. Is it going to be Zion comes back and is back to being 27 points a game, or is it going to be a little more balanced out? Obviously, having CJ there, that's just a team that like they're going to be must-watch basketball. Like just to see how they figure it out and how good they're actually going to be. Man, I'm excited to watch that Pelicans team.
I love their fit as well. It's like they have all that talent, but it's like I don't think their games run into each other and like make it harder for the other ones to do what they do. Like if Zion's really either in the dunker spot or in the post or whatever it may be, CJ is more in the perimeter distributing it, then Brandon Ingram's just kind of like that like 3-level scorer where he's doing kind of like the in-between work. I mean, that's just a really good dynamic to have, like I not to use the same word, but a dynamic offense.
Not for sure.
I also had Brandon Ingram. Well, not also had him at 6, but I had him at 5. He's next up on my list. And echoing the same thing you guys said. You guys said everything about BI. I have very little else to add. I think he just looked that much more comfortable alongside CJ. You could see the development when he did have to be that lead guy offensively last year for the Pelicans. You guys touched on the playmaking. You guys have touched on the improvement defensively. I had to give him the slight edge over DeMar for me because of that upside that he's shown defensively and because of those improvements as a playmaker. That defensive edge helps give me a bit of that. And even though he did struggle as a 3-point shooter last year, we still know that Brandon Ingram is a much better 3-point shooter than DeMar DeRozan, and he showed that in the playoffs, certainly. So those in combination gave him the edge over DeMar for me. But looking forward to what we see with BI and the Pelicans, as you guys said. And it's going to be an exciting year for pretty much every player in that organization. There's pretty much everyone in that rotation I'm looking forward to watch playing basketball next year.
I feel like
a deep team.
We all had a different order, I think, on this little like Ingram, DeMar, like little Middleton segment, because I've got Middleton at 5, and I know who Tyrik would have at 5. I assume because I think the top 4 is the top 4 set.
Yeah.
But Middleton, the reason, I don't know, me having him so high is just like, this might be like sort of like a eye test casual take, but I swear, bro, he just does whatever he's asked to do always. And I swear he like never is coming up short. I mean, obviously that's hyperbolic. Like there's obviously, he's not a perfect player, but him being the second guy next to Giannis, I swear, every time they need a good perimeter shot, it's like he's there and he makes it. Like, they're down 3 in a close game. Chris Middleton, he's the guy who was taking the last shot on a championship team, and he was doing that effectively. Like he was making those shots commonly. Not to mention two-way ability and just the ability to really. I think he's one of those players that can fit everywhere, which is something that I value. If you guys have not noticed. And so just his kind of malleability to fit around that and to really fit with the best player in the league and still get off a lot of what he does and what makes his game the best it can be, really, I think, is impressive to me. Proven player, obviously all-star player last season, which means it's not just kind of the fan perspective where, like, we know that he's really good. Even the coaches give him that shine and the other people around the league. So very well-respected player. And I guess I might be a little higher on him than you guys because he was probably a little bit down last season. Obviously missed the playoffs, but I don't know. I try not to factor in injuries too much, which we'll especially see at the top of this list. But I just think that he's so good at what he does, and he might be the best second option in the league.
No, I don't think you're too high on him because I was thinking of like the two players I was thinking about switching was him and BI. Like I was really debating it. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, the more could easily drop, like, and I could switch him and Chris Middleton. Like, that's just how good Chris Middleton is. And I was just thinking in my head, like when you were saying like he could go anywhere and fit, I was thinking like, man, like LeBron would love Chris Middleton, like a Dame would love Chris Middleton. Like he could really go anywhere and still be the same guy, like no matter what situation he's in. He's just that solid of a dude.
Yeah, definitely. He like you said, Gabe, he is that really good number 2 guy. He can do what you need. He can be a very good defender. He can play make a bit, and he makes those buckets down the stretch when you need, whether it's in the regular season or especially in the playoffs. He's everything you could ask for in a number 2. Definitely don't think you have him too high here. I was really struggling from 8 through 5. That part of the list was tough for sure.
It's that weird thing where like I think Ingram and DeMar are probably better number 1s than Chris Middleton, but he's just so good at being a number 2. And I think that DeRozan especially would probably struggle as like a certified number 2, that it's like that kind of gives him some edge. And then I don't know, him and BI is just so close. I just think Chris Middleton's done a little bit more to have that like proven ability in my mind to kind of really get your team to the next step. But I mean, the next year, like I said, Ingram could move up. Like Chris Middleton could be the first guy he could pass, because if Zion comes back and they're really hitting and they make a deep playoff run, Brandon Ingram's doing a lot next year, has a good regular season as well. I mean, right there, then it's like I've seen all I need to see to know that he is just possibly, just not just the same player, which I mean they're already right next to each other, but even on a different tier. Maybe he's on that tier with those top couple guys.
Maybe. Am I the only one who hasn't given my 5?
Yes.
Okay, it's DeMar. I think I factored in like just how crazy his season was, and I'm holding the weight of he really carried the Bulls for a lot of last year, especially with Levine being pretty banged up, Zoe missing a lot of time, Vucevic not being himself, and then just everybody else around him being decimated by injury. Like DeMar was still stable. He had like a crazy stretch where he's scoring like 35 plus points a game, and he was on the list with Will Chamberlain. Anytime you're doing that, you know you're doing some crazy shit. Like his season was pretty remarkable. We know about his pitfalls in the playoffs. So, I mean, when you're not a capable 3-point shooter, you're a bad defender, it's bound to happen. But I can't deny what he did last season, man. He was incredible. And but people were talking about he could be in real MVP talks. Like that's how good he was for a certain period of time. So I got DeMar at 5. Could easily be passed by BI. I'm expecting a regression because there's no way that he's going to go out and do the same shit he did last year. Like there's just no way.
No, there's no shot. But
he was insane.
All credit and respect to him. He had a hell of a year last year.
And that's probably like his best career season, to be honest.
By far.
Yeah,
definitely. And he made Bulls basketball like watchable again, which hasn't been that way in like half a decade. So shout out to DeMar for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he had better offensive numbers than he ever did in Toronto, while being miles better of a playmaker than he ever was in Toronto, whilst having his number 2 be banged up. So, yeah, definitely his best year.
Top 4.
All right, Gabe. What do we got? What's the start of the top 4?
I hate having him at 4 because, honestly, like, when last season ended, like he probably played the second best basketball of any small forward. But number 4, I have Jimmy Butler. Love Jimmy Butler. Obviously, what he brings on the defensive end and just his like all around game, and him just he like does everything, and he's like does everything well. I mean, the exception there is sort of like the outside shot, but then he just has those moments where he's like, I'm about to put this team away. And it's like 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and he makes like 3 3-pointers in a row to put the team away. Like, that's just the kind of guy he is. It's like, this is what our team needs right now. I'm going to do that at a star level. And it's just whatever you need from him. Like, he's a guy he'll average like 20, 21 points per game, and then in the playoffs he'll drop 40 like it's nothing. And it's just like you can't stop him. He's probably the best at drawing fouls in the entire association. When he wants to turn on the defense, he's not like the best defender in the league, but very, very good at it. He can do some playmaking. Obviously, he can do some scoring, and it's just like his all-around game so well-rounded. And then just his ability to put on a backpack and get a win by any means necessary. As we saw, he was a shot away from taking his team to the finals for the second time in 3 years. Just a winning player. And at the end of the day, if your goal in a basketball game is to win, while some of the other guys may have more flashy stats, more flashy just moves, and so many more things to their game that just look better or they might feel better, Jimmy Butler is still going to go into a game and he might win that game without anybody else on the team really putting up really amazing stats. Like the entire season, the Heat were looking like, okay, Bam might be getting towards like decoy conversations. Tyler Hero was easily looking like the best offensive player on the team. Playoff time came, and it was just Jimmy all the way. And while, yes, like his regular seasons might not be as insane with the Heat constantly pulling like 4 or 5 seeds, and then that's where they make their runs at, his elevation in the playoffs might be second to none. And it's just like I would love to put him even higher just because this guy is almost taking his team to the finals without a ton of great help in those situations.
I was just about to say, when I started talking about Jimmy, he's my number 4 as well. That the way he elevates his game is probably the best in the league, like regular season compared to playoffs. Because like you said, regular season, he's cool. Like he'll average 20, 21, maybe 22 on a great year. But in the playoffs, it's pretty much 30 every single night, it seems like. Like I don't really remember his exact numbers in the playoffs, but I know there's a stretch of time where it was 30 points pretty much every single game. Obviously, I witnessed what he did to us in the conference finals. He dropped 40 multiple times, and in that game 7, he was the sole lone reason why Miami had a chance to really win that game at the end. And you live and die with the shot that he took. We talked about that before. But, man, Jimmy's a killer, man. Like, he is a dog. It's a shame that Miami didn't really do much to kind of capitalize on how good of basketball he plays in the playoffs. Like, they didn't really do shit this offseason, which is very unfortunate. But we know one thing for sure, like Miami's going to have a chance in the Eastern Conference because they have Jimmy Butler and because of what he can do in the postseason. And yeah, he's number 4. I did want to put him higher too, but we can't solely focus on just the playoffs because regular season, we know Jimmy kind of coasts where everybody else in this list regular season, except maybe the exception of Kawhi Leonard, really like is in a bag in the regular season. Jimmy Butler's just cool in the regular season, but postseason, he's one of the best players in the league.
Yeah. I like that last point you made because I wanted to touch on that. And that's the biggest reason why he was at 4 and there wasn't really much of a debate for me, at least, of putting him any higher is because of that regular season performance. And that's not to say that he's bad in the regular season, but as you guys mentioned, there's just such a big leap to his performances in the playoffs. And full credit to him for those level of performances in the playoffs, and that's a big part of why he's so high on this list. But when you do compare him to the guys above him, Tatum, LeBron, and Kawhi, it's tough to put him any higher because of those regular season performances. Still a good player in the regular season, but you don't really look at Jimmy Butler in the regular season and say, oh, this guy's a superstar. And then you see him in the playoffs and it's like, oh, he might be a superstar. And
Yes.
That's every year, and that's fine as long as they get to the playoffs because then it doesn't matter. But as far as his own individual ranking goes, it definitely hurts him. But another great year by Jimmy. As you mentioned, absolutely brilliant playoff run, averaged over 27 a night on very good efficiency. And, was the reason as to why Miami did so well. As you guys were talking about with Tyler Hero, like being the main scoring option that was being talked about heading into the playoffs. I remember having that discussion in multiple videos before the playoffs. And it's like, I wasn't considering Jimmy Butler as the number 1 guy because regular season just isn't there, but man just continues to show that in the playoffs he can be that guy, and full credit to him. He had another absolutely brilliant playoff run, and as long as they can keep getting into the playoffs, they seem to have a shot.
Yeah, last year was honestly, even though they didn't make the finals like the bubble year, it was probably his best personal year in the playoffs. Compared to the bubble run, he averaged like 5 more points. It looks like, better efficiency pretty much. Like,
Yeah, definitely his
he
best playoff.
led the league in steals. in this playoffs.
Yeah, the bubble, it seemed like Jimmy was very good like in that final series, but like a lot of it was like Bam was the best player in the conference finals, then Tyler Hero was having games. Duncan Robinson would have some crazy games, but this postseason it was Jimmy Butler. And all the discourse around it was, can somebody help this man out? Like, Bam, can you start taking some more shots? Tyler Hero, can you get healthy? Kyle Lowry, can you do something? And nobody really stepped up consistently, but Jimmy Butler was there every single game. And when their backs were against the wall, went out and put up 47 points in the elimination game, which is crazy. Like, Jimmy was on some other stuff this postseason, but can't put him higher than other guys because regular season, he's just very cool. He's a good player, but other guys in the regular season are, like, no doubt all NBA guys.
Jimmy's at his best when he's with the third stringers, man. When the other players aren't playing very good, Jimmy, he's just like, oh, it's time to carry it. Then he just goes nuclear. And if he doesn't have to, he doesn't. But it's just like, oh, they need me, I'm there.
I know there has to be footage of that Timberwolves practice, bro. Like, there has to be. I would pay so much money to see that. I would pay so much money to see that shit.
Shoot, that's got to be what turned Wiggins' career around, bro. That's got to be.
He probably watches that film every single night.
All right, all right. The top three, I kid you not, I had a different guy at number 3 when I was like getting ready to join the call. But I changed my list.
That's fair.
So at number 3, I have Kawhi Leonard.
I do too.
And
Okay.
I do too.
I had Kawhi at 2 before, but it's just like he is so good, so impactful, can go out and win playoff games. Unfortunately, it's like I say, I don't try to – if you have like an injured season, I don't try to hold that too much against you. Saw that with like Damian Lillard, or like Paul George was still number 1 on my list, even though he missed like quite a few games last season. But I feel like Kawhi is just whether it just be the load management, it just feels like he's always out. I feel like I've barely seen Kawhi play in like 3 years. And even when he was in Toronto that year, he was missing quite a few games for like the load management coming off the San Antonio thing. But it's just like the inconsistency of his availability is just a little bit concerning. And that's why I can't put him as like number 1, especially because the last time we really saw him have a crazy playoff run was like 2019. Obviously, the bubble year, blowing the 3-1 lead. 2021, I mean, they were going to go to the conference finals. They could have won if he was there, but then he goes down, so we never really saw the ending of that. So it's kind of just like an unknown. So that is hard to judge how they would have done against Phoenix, because Phoenix was really hitting at that point, and that series could have been a bit of a determiner. But it's like we're talking about like how's your regular season, and then how's your playoffs, and kind of balancing that, whether you elevate or just like if one really can help your standing on a list more than the other, like we just saw with Jimmy. It's like we really have not seen a lot of regular season Kawhi. And so when we're splitting hairs, because I think this top 3 is incredibly close, he's kind of the guy that fell a little bit, because, I mean, the other 2 guys still, I mean, obviously we know it's LeBron and Tatum. They can still score really well at all-time level, or at least LeBron at an all-time level. I think Tatum could get there. Probably still needs a little – I know he's a little young to be making those claims, but very good 3-level scorer, of course. I think the other 2, when they're on, they can have solid defense. Not as good as Kawhi, especially LeBron with his age. But when it's so close, it's just really him not being there and all the unknowns. It is one situation where it does kind of count against a little bit, just because it is so significant and has been for about 3 years now.
Yeah, he's my 3 as well. I think for really everything Gabe just said, it's like the fact that we haven't seen him play in like over a year is the main reason why he's not number 2 for me. But I think the fact that he hasn't played in so long and he's still top 3 on all of our lists shows just how damn good he is. Like, we know how good Kawhi Leonard is. And I think after this season, I have high hopes for the Clippers. I think after this year, we're going to know, like, okay, Kawhi's back to being arguably the best small forward in the basketball. But right now, it's just like we haven't seen him playing so long, even though when the last time we did see him play, he was elite. I just got to hold that against him a little bit when you're just splitting hairs. But we know how good Kawhi is. And we're going to see it again this season, probably in like 55 games or so, because we know he's going to load manage. But once the playoffs come around, we know we're going to see one of the best basketball players in the world. And I'm excited, man. Like, I miss watching Kawhi Leonard play basketball because he's just so damn good.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's going to be nice to see Kawhi back on the court this year, and hopefully he can stay healthy alongside the rest of that Clippers roster, and they can have another shot at it. I'm the odd man out here with not having Kawhi at number 3. I have Jayson Tatum at number 3. For me, as much as Tatum was very good this year, I did struggle to put him in the conversation with LeBron and Kawhi, although I do understand why you guys did put him at number 3, considering how good of a season Tatum did had and the injury concerns of Kawhi over the last 12 to 16 months. But there's no doubt Tatum had a brilliant year last year. I'm sure the Celtic fan in the room will have a lot to say about that in a moment. But he had a great year. Best year of his career yet so far. Was a big reason why Boston were able to be so good in the second half of the season. Continues to improve as a playmaker. Has really taken strides forward on the defensive end to a point where he is borderline elite, if not an elite defender on the wing. Did struggle at times in the playoffs, but we've seen how good Tatum can be on the offensive end. He does more now than it's more now than if Tatum has a bad shooting night, he can't impact the game. He can play make. We saw that in the playoffs. He's had bad scoring nights, and he would play make for others. He can be a very good defender, an impactful defender. So if he's having off nights at times, he's not just not scoring and not really doing anything else, which is significant for him at this point in time. Hopefully we get to that point where he has a little bit more consistency. That's still the biggest thing that is keeping him from that Kawhi and LeBron tier, because those off nights that we see a bit too often from Tatum just isn't really a thing that we see from those top tier elite guys like a LeBron, like a Kawhi. And so that's holding him back a little bit for me, but no doubt brilliant year last year from Tatum. Still, I mean, the ceiling is still sky high for him. We're far from seeing the best of Jayson Tatum, and I would not be surprised at all over the next couple of years if he slots up a spot or two on this list.
I'm about to give a crazy take, yo. I'm about to give an insane take, and it feels so bad to do. I hate doing this because if you ask me my top 10 players right now, I feel like I don't know if I would give you like this guy over this guy, but I just feel like I was looking at them and I was looking at, okay, we're ranking them on like right now and like really mostly what they've done the most recently. I have LeBron at number 2. And it feels so weird to do because he's LeBron James. And I think my main thing, almost like the Kawhi situation, was ever since LeBron's come to LA, he really has not had a good record with health. It started in 2019, obviously the first like major injury of his career. He was such an Iron Man for the first 16 or so seasons. And then that happened. And then the bubble year, they stayed mainly healthy. But the same thing with like him and AD and really that whole Lakers squad was like that bubble really helped him as an older team. Like having that break in the middle of the season, obviously the long, like taxing 82 games is a lot on the human body. Them having that break and then coming back, they were able to stay healthy and get it done. But then they came back to more normal. I mean, obviously the 72-game season wasn't normal by any stretch of the imagination with the short and off season and everything. But came back to that, and then health wasn't really great. And then obviously we know this past season, like the Lakers were kind of – I mean, LeBron would have had the scoring title if it wasn't for him missing the games played requirement. And so it's like with that being said, LeBron still does put up really great stats. But last season, obviously there was a lot of things with the team, but it really was not contributing to winning in a big way. Like he was going out there dropping 30 or so every night, and it's like the Lakers just weren't getting it done. And then, I mean, his defense is obviously not where it used to be in his prime. He can still turn it on and play some good defense at certain stretches, but with all he's doing with playmaking and scoring, obviously that kind of takes a bit of a hit, whereas I think even Kawhi would have two-way over him at this point, and Tatum definitely does as well. So it's like it's so close, and it's just like I think might be just a little bit of recency, not even like against LeBron all the way, but then even for obviously that means I have Tatum at number 1. I just think what I've seen from them most recently, Tatum's the way it contributed to winning, his two-way, and just like I don't know. It was a really hard decision to make. Like I said, I switched my list like right before we came in here, and I was just thinking about it, and I'm like, Kawhi's barely played in like 2-3 years. LeBron's only fully healthy season was in the bubble, and Tatum just led his team to the finals. And when you're that close and you're splitting hairs, I'm thinking like, wow, yes, you like Devin, you had Tatum at 3 because he had some of those inconsistent nights. Those inconsistent nights, at least he's giving you something. Whereas in exchange for the inconsistency, Kawhi and LeBron just aren't playing, and they're giving you nothing. And so while like LeBron and Kawhi might both be more talented, and if you ask me just like a top 10 players list, like purely based on skill, I don't know if I would be able to put Tatum over, and it's so close. But just because of the criteria I'm going off of, Tatum took my number 1 spot for today.
It's different. It's different. I thought about. I'm not gonna lie. I did think about it for a second, but no, I got Tatum at 2. I got Jayson Tatum at 2. I do like your argument, Gabe, but my thing is, I think Tatum still has levels to jump. I mean, he's number 2. I mean, it's not like he's got to get supremely better or anything, but there's still some things that he needs to improve on. You know, just like making the game more simple. But I think Dev mentioned a lot of great points, which was going to be my argument for Tatum. Is like, and I was saying this pretty much throughout the entirety of the season. Like, you started to see where early on in the season when he was having 9 for 30 shooting games, he wasn't doing anything else. But then as we got through the season, all of a sudden, Tatum's becoming, you know, a really good defender. Some people was calling him an elite defender. His playmaking improved. Like, he was really doing things to affect the game outside of scoring, to where when he had those bad shooting nights, he was still having like, 10 assist games. Like we saw in the finals game 1. I think he had like 12 assists in that game 1 because he didn't shoot the ball well. He was terrible shooting the ball, but he was affecting the game in other ways, which is one of my biggest like praises about Jayson Tatum this season, is how much he did improve in that aspect. But there's still some other things that he needs to improve on. Like I saw a lot in the finals, he was just getting tunnel vision and trying to play a lot of hero ball, which we just don't need to see. But he's still young, only 24 years old, so there's still room for him to grow, which is kind of scary. But I can't have him above LeBron just yet. Even though LeBron only played like, I think 55 games last year, he didn't play as many games as, you would like LeBron to play, but I still think LeBron James is the best small forward in the league. He's still one of the best players in the league. And just because the Lakers were bad, I don't think it was really because of him, because most nights it was LeBron and nobody else helping him out. Anthony Davis is missing all this time. Russell Westbrook was not good for them. They didn't have any spacing, like just a very badly constructed team. And I think it's still crazy at this age that LeBron is still the best at his position in the world. And some people might argue like he might still be the best player in the world. I don't think so, but some people may still argue that.
Yeah, I think LeBron is sort of past that kind of best player in the world. I do think there's a couple better. I think Giannis is like far and away. The gap is not gigantic between maybe him and like 2 and 3, but I think that it's like easy decision. I'm not thinking about it for more than 5 seconds. Giannis is the best player in the world. LeBron is still very good. I don't even know if I can say like at full strength that Tatum is better than LeBron. Like I said, it's just like what I saw from them last season, to be consistent with my criteria. I kind of felt like I had to put Tatum at 1, given everything. Fair. But it's just such a weird thing to say because he's LeBron. Like he's like one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest player of all time. It's just like it was a down season. And if he comes back next year and it's like he's just doing normal LeBron things again, and the Lakers are in the playoffs and things are just clicking a little bit more, he can find that consistent health. He's right back there to number 1. It's not like he's really fallen off much. He's still franchise player, franchise piece, a guy who you would take an instant on your roster no matter what situation you're in.
Definitely.
And yet we're saying this, and how it's crazy that we're on some lists not calling him number one, even though he's been one of the greatest players of all time. But we are saying he is one of the greatest and best still in the league at 37. So when you put it into perspective, it is pretty crazy that we're still talking about LeBron as this impactful of a player at this point in time in his career. I had LeBron at number 2. He did not get the number 1 spot on my list. That availability played a part. That decline in defense over the years played a part. But as you guys mentioned, I mean, at his age, the fact that he is still such a valuable and impactful player is just absurd. His lack of availability over the last 2 years has been unfortunate. The team building around him has been unfortunate. But when he's been available, he's been brilliant. One of the best scorers in the league last year. And of course, as you guys mentioned, unfortunately, he didn't play enough to get that scoring title. But he's been absolutely brilliant still in LA, despite some of the problems with the roster and internally over the last couple of years. But he didn't quite get the number 1 nod for me. I gave it to Kawhi. I know he hasn't played in a while, but I couldn't give it to Tatum because I didn't think Tatum was on the same tier as LeBron and Kawhi yet. He can get there, but I don't think he's there yet. And if LeBron had been playing 70, 75 games a year the last 2 years, it might have been easier, but he hasn't been. He hasn't exactly been available either. I know Kawhi just missed an entire year. But assuming Kawhi can come back and stay healthy, which is a big assumption, but assuming so, we've seen him recover from a serious injury once already, then I don't see a reason why Kawhi can't be in the same discussion as LeBron. And for me personally, from what I last saw from Kawhi, that gave him the nod for me over LeBron. Kawhi, when we last saw him play on the court, I still can't believe these numbers because they're so absurd. It's a small sample size, but 11 games in the playoffs, 57% from the field on over 30 points a game. He was just played absurd, and that's what we get from Kawhi in the playoffs. He is so good in the playoffs, and he's still really good in the regular season, but he just turns that up that little bit more in the playoffs. And when I look at him and LeBron both struggling for lack of availability, but then I can see they're both great scorers. They're both good playmakers. They turn up in the postseason. But that defensive decline from LeBron hurts for me personally, because when Kawhi is locked in and when you need him to play defense, he is still one of the best wing defenders in the league. That's just not the case for LeBron anymore. Still a great player, but he's just not at that level defensively anymore. And so for me, that was probably the biggest difference between me putting Kawhi at 1 and LeBron at 2. It is negligible. You are definitely picking at straws to determine between these top 3 guys, or top guys. But for me, I had to put Kawhi at 1 and LeBron is at 2. Could that change if Kawhi doesn't stay healthy? Unfortunately, yeah, it probably could, but hopefully Kawhi stays healthy and that's not a concern. But I did end up with Kawhi at number 1.
I like this.
We all had different number 1s.
We did.
We all had different number 1s. Yeah.
That's the first time on the list. I thought shooting guard would be the most varied, but yeah, literally like an hour ago, my list read like LeBron, Kawhi, Tatum, because I was just thinking like pure like talent wise, but I don't know. Like obviously didn't count against Dame. Other guys I didn't count against for injuries, but it's like those like LeBron and Kawhi, it's just been so like almost patternized of like, dang, they're missing time all the time that right now I was just like I said, like when I did it, it was almost less about like penalizing LeBron and Kawhi because they're so close to each other. And like you said, it's like Kawhi's defense is still top tier and LeBron's playmaking is arguably the best in the league. So it's like they both have those insane factors. It was just like what Jayson Tatum just did at his age, which I know like age is not a factor that makes you better than another player, but it's just what he just did. I'll give him the rub right now. I'll give him the recognition. When the other 2 guys did not play in this postseason, one of them didn't play in this season at all, and he just took his team to the NBA Finals as a number 1 option. I felt like I had to reward that. And literally, we could be a month into next season, and I'll be like, oh, LeBron's clearly better than him still in year 20. And I don't even think there's anything wrong with that. It's just right now, on September 11th, 2022. I'm giving Jayson Tatum that love, even though he went Hollywood on my guy.
Man,
I still,
it's all good. It's all good though, man. I love Jayson Tatum at number one. Like it's cool. I thought about it myself, but I don't know, man. It's crazy that I still regard LeBron so highly, even though he's about to be in year 20. He's 37, turning 38 in December. And he's still that good. Like, it doesn't make sense, man. It just makes me think, like, how long is LeBron going to be this good? I think it's until he wants to be, honestly. Like, that's what it seems like.
which
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely seems that way. Just crazy.
it's like the same, like with Tatum being so young and LeBron being so old, playing at the levels they're playing at. It's like age cannot factor in to your ranking, but like it's so impressive.
I don't even think it's the age that's factoring in. It's just like LeBron's still just this damn good.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just so impressive. It's like, yeah, if LeBron was at like 4 or 5 right now, like that would still be insanely impressive for where he's at. Because I mean, obviously the biggest person LeBron is compared to, Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan was 37, like where was he at on shooting guards list? Definitely below Iverson, below Kobe, probably below T-Mac.
yeah,
Talking about like the Wizards days, like he was definitely not in the top 3 shooting guards at that point. So just I don't know how he's doing that, man. Especially with that carry job last season. I mean, it definitely makes sense why he was missing games and like because the durability, just being that old and having to carry that heavy of a load for your team. Like I don't like even blame him for being injured because it was like the same story in 2019. It's like they had the young guys, but the young guys weren't like, I hate using this phrase, but they really hadn't learned how to win yet. Like that team really hadn't done much of anything. And so LeBron was coming there and they had a pretty good record until he went out. But you could see like it was really his influence and still carrying over from some of that like 2018 carry job that he was doing all that. And his body just finally gave out on him. But when LeBron James is on the basketball court, like he's still competing with anybody. Like Giannis is the best player in the league, but he's on Giannis's level. He's on Kevin Durant's level. He's on Jokic's level.
definitely. Well, I'm glad we all had. I was scared at first because our lists were all very similar for most of it, but once we got to like 7,
Yeah,
like,
they got pretty different pretty
there.
quick. I think the only picks we all had the same were 10 and 4.
That's good.
Everything else there was some differences.
That's good.
Mainly
That's good.
me
Good for
having
content.
some differences, but that's fine. That seems
Yeah,
to
I
be my
think
theme the last
all
couple
good.
weeks, so I can work with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
me and Tyrik had like Tatum and LeBron flipped and like Middleton and DeRozan flipped. I think the rest of our list was the same though.
I think so.
Yeah, you guys both had BI at 6, both had Edwards at 8, both had Bridges at 9, Jimmy at 4,
Which-
Kawhi
yeah.
at 3.
It's funny how like close, like because we were even talking before we started the episode. It's like, yeah, he was like, "Oh, I've got a couple guys that are close," and I'm like, "Is it like Middleton to DeRozan?" And he was like, "Yeah." And it's like we both had BI at 6, but Middleton and DeRozan on separate ends of him. So
Damn, Joe Burrow already threw a pick 6.
Yeah.
Jeez.
yeah, Evan McPherson just made a field goal that would have been good from 65.
Damn.
That boy has a leg on him.
No doubt. That's crazy.
It's crazy that the NFL's even started. Like, I feel like it came out of nowhere. I didn't hear any type of like hype or anything. And then all of a sudden, last Wednesday, it was like, "Oh, football is back tomorrow," and I was like, "I beg your pardon."
I think
Like-
it only starts for me once like fantasy drafts are like
Yeah.
about to start.
That's true. That's true.
Ugh.
Like I kind of forgot like half the rosters almost, like because it was just so much player movement that it's like, oh my gosh. But it's like whenever an NBA player moves teams, I usually know because obviously I'm doing this, so I'm covering it. I have to know. I have to keep in touch. And even if I didn't, like I probably follow it a little bit closer than the NFL, and it's just easier to cover than the NFL too because every NBA roster has like probably 10 to 11 guys that matter.
Yeah.
If that. where like if the team signs somebody as their like 14th man, like I don't care. We're not talking about that on the podcast. Like it's not like newsworthy.
And
So it's
unless
like,
you're Josh Jackson, and then you
right.
get talked about.
So yeah, you got maybe about like 300 guys to keep track of, which is easier than it sounds. But then in the NFL, like every team has like 50 players and 20 something starters. Like
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
It's
lot
special
for sure.
teamers and stuff. Like
right, yeah. Like I don't know how people can cover the NFL so closely. There's just so many players, so many things going on. Players just get like released and then picked up at different times, and I have so much respect for people who cover it just because of how really much there is to get into.
Yeah, I think fantasy really helps me stay in tune, like with who's where. Like that's the main thing that keeps me like aware of everybody. So because I don't really play Madden like that, so it's really just fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 2K is always a big help in like those random players. Like, what team is Marquise Chris on right now? I don't know. Let me hop on 2K. That's
should be on the Rockets.
The game, and I'm like,
man, tackle that dude. Damn.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that. Like, I would not know that he was on the Rockets right now because obviously I know where most players are at, but
at least he should be on the Rockets. But I don't know. They might have released him.
Players that are not in the off season, at least players that are not impact players might fall by the wayside. Now we get to like October, November, I'm probably gonna know what team everybody's on. But like right now in early September, like if you're not a player who's contributing to like, if you're not a needle mover at all, I might not know where you're at. And honestly, I don't really know if there's much of a problem with that because if you're trying to project how a team's gonna do, or like how the season's sort of going to unfold, what dynamics are going to be like. If you're not making that much of an impact on the team, I mean, respectfully, how much does that matter in coverage, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely some guys that you don't always remember until you can put a face to the jersey when you're watching. Like, no one's going to talk about Edmund Sumner when they talk about the Nets, but then people will see him play in the middle of November, and they'll be like, oh, that's where he is now.
Yeah, I do feel like the thing that I do know that a lot of people don't is I'm usually pretty good with jersey numbers. Like, there's a lot of people who it'll be like high tier, like high value starters, and they'll be like, I don't know their number. I feel like
I don't know any numbers.
I'm usually pretty
I think one of my buddies quizzed me a couple of months ago. I think I need 2 player numbers on the Raptors. Like I don't pay attention to the numbers at all, apparently.
I think I know pretty much every player's number who plays on the Raptors often. I know like
what number does Malachi Flynn wear? I don't even know that, honestly.
I got no idea.
Well, in my head, it's like 8, but I don't know if that's right. I feel like it's a single-digit number.
8 sounds right. Oh, 8 sounds right.
You said 14?
22.
22.
Oh, 22. Oh, wait. No, it's because wait.
I feel like he changed his number.
He had to change his number because there's literally pictures of him in a Raptors jersey wearing 8. Like, if you look at Malachi Flynn on Google right now, like the first picture.
Must have changed his number.
Yeah. So, you know what? I'm taking a dub on that. He wore 8 for the Raptors. So that wasn't necessarily wrong. If you change your number like that, man, like that,
I think I can name almost every Celtic that played last season. I don't know I think Malcolm Brogdon might wear 13. I think
that's about right. Yeah,
I think that's right.
Not sure.
I don't know anybody else that
my
would have
opinion
worn
on
that,
but I think so.
I don't know anybody else that would have worn that in Indy or Milwaukee when he was there. I think he's just always been 13.
I think that's like the only number he had like at his disposal because the Celtics have so many retired numbers.
Isn't like 4 the only available single-digit number they have?
4, 8, 9.
Oh yeah, because
that's not
wore
retired.
8. That's right.
Yeah, that's not retired.
I mean, yeah. I was going to say because like
0.
Derek White
wears 9.
He wears 9. For some reason, I thought he wore. Oh no, he wore 4 on San Antonio. I think.
Yeah, he wears 9. I don't know why he didn't wear 4 in Boston. Honestly, I don't
think
anybody is.
When players like change their numbers,
Four's not retired.
Maybe maybe like 9 was his main number, and he wore 4 because somebody was 9 on like
Tony
the
Parker.
Spurs. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. So I think 9 is probably. It's like isn't it a thing? Like, wasn't it Kyrie who his main number like was 11 and he wore 2 in Cleveland for some reason? I think was Ilgauskas 11?
Yeah, Ilgauskas was.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, players like that, like they become so well known for a number that's not even their main number, just because of circumstance like that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Some stuff is
7
interesting.
was-
Like, yeah, 7. Like KD was 7 and like 35. Like, he's gonna be legendary in 2 numbers. I don't know. I think
he ain't legendary in 7. He only won 1 playoff series. He ain't legendary.
All right, he ain't legendary yet, but I still believe in KD.
That's fair.
I think KD will get another ring in his career. I don't know where. I don't know if that'll be with Brooklyn or not, but I think the player he is, like, if it really doesn't work out in Brooklyn and he gets up out of there, he's going to go to a good team because he's Kevin Durant. Like, he's the kind of guy that'll be 35, still be pretty good, and he'll be like, all right, I'm going to go to this team that looks really good so I can compete at the highest level. That's just the kind of guy he strikes me as.
My bad. Taysom Hill just got a big run. He looks huge now, bro. Like he put on like 20 pounds of muscle.
No doubt. I'm just seeing that now.
Is he starting or is
he's playing
Jameis
tight end. He plays tight end now full time.
I thought Jameis was the starter, so
Yeah.
Jameis
better tighten up, man. That's all I'm saying.
that should be an interesting one. Just
we just
he's
scored.
such an unknown.
Taysom Hill scored.
I
hate in fantasy when like all my players play later in the day.
Yeah, that's never ideal.
I love early season in every sport, just like because you just see like how those new players fit in, and I think that's going to be like when the season starts. Some of our like first podcast episodes, like it's just going to be so cool talking about these new players and how they adjust to their roles. Like, because sometimes it's just super disappointing. Like I remember when I got 2K18, I was playing with that Knicks squad with D Rose and Joakim Noah and like Melo Porzingis. Like I thought they were cool. I was literally spamming them in 2K, having so much fun. And I'm like, oh, this team's about to low key be nice. Like I think D Rose is gonna have a bit of a resurgence. Like he's gonna be cool. And then season starts. Joakim Noah was terrible, injured. D Rose was injured. Porzingis and Melo still weren't really getting it done, and it's like, oh, that team
was
like,
bad.
I was super excited to see how their new pieces fit in. And then it really did not move the needle at all. And so like every season that comes around, like I love seeing new pieces, and if they fit in and if they're making an impact or if they really just don't end up doing anything, and it's like, oh, I thought they would do like so much. Like, why isn't this working?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, first 3 or 4 weeks of the season is going to be, I want to see how the Pelicans fit. I want to see how the Magic play with Banchero and with Fultz back for a full season. I want to see how Garland and Mitchell fit. I want to see how Trae Young and DeJounte Murray fit. Like there's so many new configurations now that just to see how those fit in and how productive they can be, how they end up orchestrating their offense or defense together, depending on the team. How do Gobert and Towns fit together? Like there's just so many different roster changes that just make it that much more exciting to see how things go early on. No doubt.
And half of those might not matter. Like, to be fair, like half of those might not be needle movers. Another 2, they might move the needle, but it might take a team from like a 6 seed to a 3 seed, and they're still not like in the top tier of people competing for a championship. And it's just like, it's still so cool and just so interesting. But then there's going to be something that we haven't even talked about at all, like maybe some like middle tier role player or like quality starter that switch teams, and then all of a sudden they're like averaging like 23 points per game.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, because I mean, every season has a surprise. It's like doing it's the classic plight of doing most improved player predictions. You're almost always wrong.
Literally,
because it's always just a surprise. It's usually never who you expect it to be, because that's like the most improved. It's the guy that really came out of the blue most of the time. I mean, this was sort of an exception season with Ja Morant because everybody already knew that he was about to be special.
But even then, I don't think a lot of people thought he was going to be the most improved guy. Like everyone knew he was going to be good, but like that much of a leap this soon was still a really big surprise.
Right. So, yeah.
It does seem to be that guy that's caught off guard for sure. Definitely was not Nikhil Alexander-Walker. So,
please stop reminding me, man. Please stop reminding me.
Hey, I'm reminding myself too. So,
Tyrik campaign.
I thought that was such a W prediction. I was so confident in that one.
Me too.
Nikhil.
I don't even remember who I don't even remember at all who I like predicted for it last year. Obviously, we hadn't started the pod yet when.
Yeah, I think when we talked about it a couple of months ago, you talked about MPJ.
Oh,
I think so.
Yeah, even when he played. So when I was putting together this list, I was just like writing a bunch of names down off like different lists, and just to like kind of get the pool of players. And yeah, I saw MPJ on there, and like I had him written down, but then he was like the first name I took off. Him and I think Gordon Hayward were like the first two names, because I had like probably 15 written down, and him and Gordon Hayward were like the first ones I took off, because I think the list I saw with Hayward on it was a little older. He's definitely not in top 10 discussions right now.
Yeah,
but
no shot.
So
All
yeah,
respect Gordon Hayward, but no shot anymore.
Then I was thinking about it, because I know Franz was really nice as a rookie, and obviously has a lot of upside, but it's like just yet, like he only had like 15, 4, 3. So good player, but his like stats and stuff weren't really up there with the guys who made the list yet. But I don't know. I still like kept him on as like the last honorable mention, just because he was so good. He just his time is coming, just not yet.
I think I made a tweet the other day saying like people need to stop trying to put a ceiling on him already, because he's shown us no reason to think like he can't be a real deal all-star, man.
I don't understand putting ceilings on a player a year into their career, specifically for a guy who was as good as he was last year. I don't see a world in which you can put any type of ceiling on Franz. I struggle to put any type of ceiling on a guy after 1 year, because we've seen enough guys over the last 4 or 5 years that have had average to not good rookie seasons that then end up being pretty darn good. But I mean, especially in Franz's case, I mean, he had a brilliant rookie season. There's no reason to limit his ceiling in any which way. I think the sky's the limit for him. He might not be as popular of a name as the other top 3 or top 4 in the class, but there's no reason why he shouldn't be in that same tier.
I really think the best argument for him having a ceiling wouldn't even be of his own accord. I think it would be the fact that they just brought in a guy at number 1 who pretty much everybody expects by all accounts to be their number 1 guy, their franchise piece, the guy who's going to have the biggest stats, probably get the all-star projections when they become good, and everything like of that nature. And so it kind of is like, okay, now because Paolo's on the team, his ceiling's probably a number 2. And then if somebody's like super high on Cole Anthony, then they might be like, oh, he's a 3. And so, yeah, it's like, it's not even a Franz's own accord. He could literally be a great player. He could end up being better than them. But I think because the expectations for other guys are higher, it kind of unfairly maybe puts people's perception of Franz a little bit lower, because they're thinking, oh, not everybody can be the number 1 guy and put up number 1 option type stats.
Yeah, that's fair. But at the same time, like, I haven't seen Banchero even play in the NBA yet. Like, who knows? Like, who knows who's going to truly be the number 1 there yet?
Right, for sure.
I think it'll be interesting to see how Orlando's roles pan out over the next year or two as well, because they just have a lot of talent. Like, we talked about Banchero, we talked about Franz Wagner. Wendell Carter is going to continue to do his thing. You still don't even know who your true starting backcourt is yet between Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, and Jalen Suggs. I think long-term Cole Anthony projects as that true 6th man, but that remains to be seen. Like, they just have a lot of guys who are going to be able to, not all of them be great, but like Suggs hopefully can continue to develop and can get you some buckets from time to time. We've seen Cole Anthony can get you some buckets. Markelle Fultz hopefully can stay healthy and can, whether he's a starter or off the bench, can be an important part of this team. Jonathan Isaac might be back on the court this year, and we'll see what he can provide. Like, there's a lot of talent on this roster to the point where, you know, for them to start having success, at least from a starting to get to the playoff standpoint, they don't necessarily need Franz or Banchero to start dropping 26 or 27 a night. Like, they have enough that by committee, as they continue to develop, they'll probably have enough. So it'll be interesting to see how those roles start getting defined, and Franz is definitely going to be a core part of that.
Yeah, I think sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say Jalen Suggs is another guy like people need to give him a little bit of time. Like I think he's not gonna be like I don't know if he's gonna be a star. I'm not trying to put a ceiling on him, but I think he's gonna be a very, very good like role player, man. I think he's gonna be I think like defensively he's gonna be really good. Just people are trying to put that like ceiling like, oh, he had a bad rookie year. He's just not gonna be good. Like give the man a little bit of time. Like guys have had bad rookie years and have turned into very good NBA players.
Yes, but yeah, guards especially. I think first-year guards have the hardest like time in the league. Obviously, I mean, the guys who we saw at the top this year, like Franz, we're already talking about Mobley, like Scotty Barnes. It just the guys at the top usually it's from that kind of forward position where they can just come in, be good defenders, and then do like a little bit of everything else, but not be super relied upon for that kind of thing. But being like a guard, especially like way he plays the game, it's just probably not built. And we saw really similar thing with like Jalen Green really didn't play good for most of the season. I think he adjusted a little bit more than Suggs did towards the end. So he'll probably get a little bit fast tracked, which I mean you would expect because he was drafted higher. But I mean it's definitely not easy at all to make that transition. But yeah, I mean right now I would say if you're going into day one of the season, I'm probably starting Cole Anthony and Markelle Fultz and having Suggs as the sixth man. But at the same time, I could see the argument where it's like, okay, the other two might be two better guards at this very moment, but because of that, you might want one of your better guards off the bench. So like sort of like a James Harden OKC situation where like, say Markelle Fultz is the better guard, but you bring him off the bench so he can really run the bench unit. So yeah, there's so much flexibility there. But even going back to the original point about Franz, like, even if you put a ceiling on him as like, oh, he's only going to be a number 2 to Paolo, I think still he'll be like top 10 at his position. I think by next year, I don't think it's a stretch at all to say he's on that Mikal, Wiggins, Anunoby tier. Bogdanovich probably better than him next year. Like I think he could rise up the ranks pretty significantly. And like even as a second option, like I mean, I have Chris Middleton at 5 on my list, and he's a second option. Obviously, he's a second option on a finals team compared to a lottery team. But that being said, if Orlando progresses and becomes not a finals team, but even just like a 4 seed, I mean, if he's a big part of that, he's probably going to make top 10 at his position because he's going to be a top 3 most impactful player on that team. So just there's so many ways they can grow and so many players on that team that can see themselves getting a lot of recognition for different things. I could see them as a team where it's like they have a dark horse in almost every award going forward, besides maybe MVP, but like they could have a lot of dark horses in a lot of places and be a team to watch out for.
Missed field goals piss me off so much. like, bro. Welcome back to football season.
Welcome back to football season, indeed. Yeah, my last point on that guard discussion, like the latest conversations I've had with Orlando fans seem to be that Fultz is the guy and like Cole Anthony is like the true sixth man. I don't know if that's how the coaching staff sees it, and I can see that because Fultz is a bit more of a playmaker, whereas Anthony is a bit more of I just go out and get you a bucket. So I could see that long term. I think Fultz is more of that traditional starting point guard, but they got options, man, and it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I think the thing with those teams with a lot of depth is I think eventually you figure out who you really want on the team, but then that's sort of when you make that kind of not like a superstar trade, but you kind of make a little bit of a splash, give up a little bit of depth for maybe like an all-star, a fringe all-star, and really solidify yourself as a playoff contender. I think we usually see that as kind of the blueprints of building a contending team. I mean, we just saw it with the Cavs. I think the Cavs just gave up a little bit of their depth for a certified all-star, and now I think all 3 of us would probably consider them to be not a finals contender, but definitely a team that's going to be in that mix, like in the pack of playoff teams in the conference that's going to be competing probably at least to the second round, I would imagine, if not going to 7 with somebody in the first round. So I think Orlando's in a really good place to follow that blueprint. I don't know who ends up being the players they get rid of, but I'm sure we'll see in the next season or two. We'll be like, okay, there's a couple players here that have talent, but maybe they don't fit as well, like we saw with Lowry and Sexton. And then they're like, okay, we can ship these guys off somewhere else, give them a fresh start because they can clearly contribute. But we know what direction we want to go in. Almost really good rebuild by them across the board.
Yes.
Not like, I mean, I don't think anybody's beating Detroit for best rebuild in the league right now, but Orlando is definitely up there as like top 3 to 5 for sure.
They might be both top 2 or 1A, 1B, honestly, off the top of my head.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really excited to see those 2 teams play next year for sure.
Hey, I hope they develop a little rivalry, man. Rivalries are like the number one thing I want to come back. It's like, even if you're all friends off the court, which most of them are, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But it's like, man, the intensity we saw on the court between some teams, especially like the Grizzlies and everybody, I love stuff like that, man.
Yeah, me too. We definitely could get a bit more of a Cavs Raptors rivalry going over the next few years if things span out. So that could be a bit of fun.
Yeah, we saw the Knicks and the Hawks, but the Knicks fell off, man. They need to come back to the playoffs so we can see them and the Hawks like do it in the at least the play-in or something. Get that like atmosphere in the arena.
Yeah, that'd be a crazy play-in game. I don't think it'll happen, but that would be crazy.
It could. I mean, if the Hawks somehow like only ended up getting a 7 seed with their new backcourt, and then the Knicks sneak in at 10, I think that's perfectly possible. Especially if a team or two gets sort of banged up and injured and they fall off for the season, it's possible as the 7-10. But I don't think the Knicks are getting top 9 just because we saw like, one of these teams isn't making the playoffs and it's that list of 9 teams. Yeah. If it happens, it'll be a 7-10 matchup.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. You guys got anything else to add, or should we wrap it up?
Nah, man, we can go ahead and wrap it up. I'm good.
Yes, power forwards next week. If we don't all have the same number 1 next week, I'm taking names.
Nah, for sure.
Pascal Siakam, number 1. Consensus.
I got Al Horford.
The great Al Horford.
Pretty sure ESPN got him as a center.
Damn.
Do they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they have him as a center.
Everybody knows that he's better at power forward, man. Him and Rob Williams played too many games together to not both be to both be centers.
Yeah, they did. But here we are.
All right. A little bit shorter of an episode today, I think. Only an hour and a half, but that's
like
okay.
An hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Facts.
Got some football to watch.
Yes, we do. Opening Sunday. Obviously, basketball is probably not going to be the biggest thing right now, but we're still here providing content.
That we are. If you guys did tune in and enjoy the video, we appreciate you guys for tuning in and for your continued support. Be sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comments on our top 10 small forward lists, and we'll see you guys next week for our top 10 power forwards. Peace.